Reading 92 from the Psychological Commentaries on the Teachings of Gurdjieff and Ouspensky by Dr. Maurice Nicoll, Volume 1. Birdlip, November 2nd, 1943. Further note on what you are based on. In respect of various things said last week, it is quite right to say that we rest on something that is not ourselves, and which therefore can be taken away from us. It seems to me that this is the best way of starting to think at all deeply about this question, namely, what you really are. One person rests on his or her position, another on reputation, appearance, the past, and so on. Think what can be taken away from you, say in revolution. All this question belongs to what you feel yourself through, what I you feel yourself. You thank God in all sorts of different ways that you are not as others. Do you remember the parable about the two men who prayed? It was addressed unto certain which trusted in themselves that they were righteous, and set all others at naught. Christ said, 2 men went up into the temple to pray, the one a Pharisee and the other a publican. The Pharisee stood and prayed thus with himself, God, I thank thee that I am not as the rest of men, extortioners, unjust, adulterers, or even as this publican. I fast twice in the week. I give tithes of all that I get. But the publican, standing afar off, would not lift up so much as his eyes unto heaven, but smote his breast, saying, God, be merciful to me, a sinner. I say unto you, this man went down to his house justified rather than the other. For every one that exalteth himself shall be humbled, but he that humbleth himself shall be exalted. Luke 18. I heard it once said that one of the most difficult things for a man who reaches that stage of development where he begins to come in contact with the highest teaching is that he has to give up his religion. He may feel himself a very good Catholic, a very good Quaker, a very good Protestant, a very good Mahometan, and so on. He rests on this basis, thanking God he is not like other people, other unbelievers. In the highest stages of inner evolution, all such distinctions have to go completely. Perhaps you can think for yourselves how this must be so. And this applies to many other sides. To become nothing, or rather, to begin to realize one's own nothingness, would be quite impossible as long as one is certain one is better than others by reason of reputation, religion, position, cash. Can you yet grasp this idea? No one can pass through this eye of a needle as long as he is rich. You remember that Christ said to the rich young man, it is easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter into the kingdom of God. What you base yourself on is what makes you feel rich, and is therefore what turns us all into camels in regard to the work. Talking on a different scale, try to see where you are easily offended, where you feel that you have not been properly treated. If you can observe this, you will see a part of the basis on which you rest psychologically, a part of the sand on which your house is built. Or again, try to observe where and when you despise other people and think yourself superior to them, or at least think they are inferior to you and quite unimportant. This again will show you part of the basis on which you rest. Or again, try to observe where you feel flattered, where your vanity is gratified. This again will show you part of the basis on which you rest. But all this must be done quite practically by observation and not discussed theoretically. When you begin to cease to have any ideas about yourself, any pictures of yourself, you can then begin to change your inner state. To change one's inner state is to go on a long journey. There are physical journeys and psychological journeys. You cannot change your inner state if you cling to what you are based on, just as you cannot leave your room if you persist in clinging to all the articles of furniture in it and keep on saying, "These are mine, me." You can come to a state where you go on very long journeys that do not exist in physical space. You may meet new kinds of people who live elsewhere. But you cannot do this as long as you cling to yourself. Cling to me and mine. Cling to the basis that each of you rests on in so imbecile and self-complacent a way. You know how people who have to leave a burning house often catch hold of something quite imbecile and silly, such as a parrot. That is because they feel themselves by means of such outer things. They are based on them. They have no feeling of themselves at all otherwise. The feeling of real I can only come to you when all such false eyes are diminished in you. All of you may think that you never speak like that man who prayed. Thank God I am not as other men. But have you actually observed how often you do enact this without actually saying it? How often you act from this basis? We often think that we do not do the silly things that we see other people doing, and conclude, therefore, that we are really better than they are. But we do not see the silly and mean things we do ourselves. People's ways of being silly and foolish and mean vary very much. Everyone is different. The giraffe thinks the warthog is ridiculous. The jay thinks the nightingale has a wretchedly weak voice, and so on. Have you ever stood in a place in yourself in which you can almost say there is nothing of me here, either by a sense of comparison or a sense of vanity, or by any other estimation? Perhaps when you have been very ill, you have touched such a state. Here, everything falls away, and you are quite alone, but without any fear. From such a state, one can see what one is usually based on. One can catch a glimpse of all the eyes that are constantly feeding on one, like clouds of vultures and jackals and insects. It is very interesting to take the work from the standpoint of studying how to be free in oneself. Esoteric knowledge can make us free, but only by its practice. You remember the phrase, "The truth shall make you free." But how long does it take before the teaching of the work becomes truth for us, even in the remotest sense?